morning, Mr. Mkwena. Good morning to everybody.
Morning, Chair.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Mkwena, are you ready to proceed?
I'm ready, Chair.
Thank you.
Chair, prior to proceeding with the evidence of Ms. Hogan, I deemed it prudent that we should bring some of the events which transpired yesterday to your attention. We have received 2 witness statements, or statements, let me put it that way. They are dated the 11th of November 2018. They are both unsigned, and they are in the letterheads of the ANC, and with the name of Mr. Gwede at the end. I only scanned through the 2 statements. They appear to be, the first one appeared to be a response to Ms. Hogan's evidence, and the other one is a response pertaining to the testimony which was adduced by the banks in terms of term of reference 1.7. I have not as yet canvassed that statement with Ms. Hogan, and furthermore, I have not canvassed both statements with the legal team of the Commission. I thought that it wise to bring those facts to attention, but in due course, after we have formulated an approach to those statements, we'll then approach the chairperson with far much more sensible submissions around those statements. But I thought that I must simply highlight and place those facts on record.
No, thank you very much. I guess the first step is that, excuse me, the first step is that they need to be signed by whoever is making the statements so that they can be taken seriously, because you would not be able to put to the witness what you might regard as Mr. Mantashe's version when you don't have his signature on the statements.
Yes,
so it may well be, therefore, that at some stage in the future, if there is an application for leave to cross-examine Ms. Hogan, if that is what is or may be required, it may be that we might ask her some stage to come back. But it may well be that there will be no request for leave to cross-examine her, but there may be an application or a request that Mr. Mantashe's version or the ANC's version be placed, put to her for her to comment on. I guess that in due course you will get to know what the position is.
Indeed, Chair, once we have interrogated all those issues, we'll be able to approach the Chair with a proper way forward pertaining to those statements.
Okay, no, thank you.
Yes. Ms. Hogan.
Well, I'm sorry, Ms. Hogan, Mr. Mkwena and I were in part talking about you. so it may be that at some stage in the future you may be asked to come back, and I hope that you would be able to come back.
Sure.
Thank you.
Ms. Hogan, yesterday we parted ways when we were dealing with Annexure K, and that Annexure K is to be found on page 360. You had already testified on Annexure K. You were just about to link it with Annexure L, that is on page 366. You may continue to testify on the contents of Annexure A. You would recall that we adjourned at the point where I said it raised serious issues of governance, and that it raises serious issues that we are conveying to the ex-president. And for that purpose, and with the indulgence from the chair, if you may read the contents of Annexure L into the record, and thereafter give us the context.
Yes, Annexure L is a letter from myself to the President on page 366, yeah, from myself to the President, and it's dated the 8th of September.
Let me just check again whether you are audible throughout. Everybody can hear the witness? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
They can hear you. Yeah.
Thanks. So it's dated the 8th of September. Chair, you would recall that I had said that after Mr. Gama had been suspended, the Deputy Minister and myself, together with the department, had embarked on a process to selecting candidates for a new Transnet board, not for a new CEO, but for a new board.
I'm terribly sorry, Ms. Hogan. I'm going to interrupt you because of something I should have dealt with before you started. Please don't forget where you were when I interrupted you. I just wish to make the announcement that on Friday, I granted an application that had been brought by Minister Pravin Gordhan for an order shifting his evidence from the 15th of November to the 19th of November. I realized yesterday from the media that they were still talking on the basis that he was going to be giving evidence this week. That order was made on Friday, but it's only being distributed to the media today. It wasn't distributed, and it's just important that the public knows that there has been a change in regard to the date when Mr. Pravin Gordhan will be giving evidence. The order that I made, which was in accordance with the agreement that the Commission's legal team and Minister Gordhan's lawyers had made, included that apart from giving evidence on the 19th, which is Monday next week, he will remain available on Tuesday the 20th in case he is still needed and in case I grant any leave to cross-examine that may be brought. I just thought I must let the public know about that, and I should have made it before Ms. Hogan began her evidence. I apologize to have interrupted you. Thank you. Mr. Mngwana, you may proceed.
Ms. Hogan, you were at the verge of giving context to Annexure 11,
yes.
Annexure L on page 366. Yes, you may proceed.
Okay, this was a letter to the President from myself, a Transnet chairperson. The Deputy Minister and I were intent on submitting a cabinet memorandum for the appointment of a Transnet board, for some board members to retire, some to stay on, but new members, and that would obviously include a chairperson because there was an acting chair. When that was submitted through the Cabinet Secretariat and whatever, the request came and the President wanted to speak to me about it. Finally, we were able to speak telephonically, and the President then said that he would want, as he had said before, several names as candidates for chairperson, and also he wanted the CV for them, for any candidate, and also the CV of the chairperson of another board that I was taking to Cabinet for approval, and that was the board of a South African, of SAFCOL, which is a forestry company. So those were immediately forwarded onto the president. I think it was exactly the same day, those CVs and whatever, in response to his request. And a reminder from my department on both, I think it was the 10th and the 11th, to the president, requesting the meeting in this regard.
Yes.
So the letter...
Before you go to the reminders, let's deal first with Annexure L and its contents. What did you convey to the president, if you may read the contents of that letter into the record?
Okay. So firstly, I reminded the president that Transnet has been operating with an acting chair. And at its AGM on the 24th of July, the terms of the board members and the acting chair had to be extended until such time that a new board is appointed. Now, Chair, you will recall that Mr. Gama's disciplinary process really only ended at the end of June, and he was fired. And so to put a board together in 3 weeks in time for an AGM in July would have been impossible. You've got to do a proper job. So once again, and this was the second time, Chair, I had to go to an AGM of Transnet and say, I'm not ready yet to appoint a board, or, or to address vacancies that were due to occur in the board, as well as the acting chair and the CEO. The second issue I raised mentioned that Transnet was about to engage on an 84 billion five-year expenditure program. It was a massive investment program. Government, from a macroeconomic point of view, had taken the view, and in my view it was a correct view, that massive investment in infrastructure yields results in that it promotes the economy and it provides employment. And therefore, both Transnet and Eskom, who were at the point and needed massive investment, were going to embark on those investments. Now, Transnet was particularly well placed to embark on it because its balance sheet was looking very good. It at least balanced, but it still needed, the borrowings and whatever for that investment. I then said, we need a strong board to oversee this massive investment process, and that it was, because of the importance of Transnet to the economy, it was absolutely important that the chair and the board be appointed. And that my department had prepared a cabinet memorandum for discussion at cabinet, but it was not yet submitted. So this is because we agreed that we would discuss the matter first so that I can ascertain your final views on the composition of the board, in particular the chairperson. So in that telephonic conversation, he had said to wait before submitting because he wanted to see these CVs. I mentioned the name of the two candidates, and then I say, I request an appointment at your earliest convenience to discuss this matter further with the Deputy Minister and myself in order that we are able to discuss your views on the preferred candidate and therefore deal with it. So that was the point.
And this is against the background of correspondence that we've dealt with yesterday and the memoranda which you said that the president did not react to.
Yes, we were wanting to put this memorandum forward. The Cabinet Secretariat advised us that the President first wanted to discuss this.
Now, in relation to Annexure L, after dispatching it to the President, did he react to Annexure L?
Once again, no response. My department, my Secretariat sent a request twice after this letter requesting that urgent meeting, and there was no response from the Presidency.
Now, may I refer you to page 15, paragraph 57 of your witness statement?
Yes.
Now, on page 15, while you were still waiting for those responses from the President, then you recorded the following on paragraph 57. 3 days later, on Sunday, 31st October 2010, the President's office called me to a meeting with him and in the presence of Gwede Mantashe, the Secretary General of the ANC. President Zuma said that the NEC has decided to redeploy me as the ambassador to Finland. I declined the redeployment and informed them that I would be resigning as a member of Parliament.
Yeah.
Now, you were expecting a response from the President on a number of issues which you raised with him as per the correspondence that we canvassed yesterday. The response that you received from the President was 3 days later. I'm sure that you did not bargain for it, that you're going to be now redeployed to Finland.
Chair, there had been lots of rumors that I was going to be redeployed. Not redeployed, but I was going to be reshuffled. So, but I had no idea that I was going to be sent as an ambassador to Finland. I raised with the President the question that my partner, Mr. Kathrada, who had spent 26 years in jail, that I could not see my way fit to request him to accompany me for a further 5 years to live in Finland, away from his country, family, friends, and everything that meant so much to him. And so I thanked the President. I said, but I'm not going to be able to accept that deployment because it would not work for me from a personal point of view.
Yeah. Did the President at any stage indicate to you whether he was...
Well, Mr. Mokoena, I am just reflecting on the fact that you are the one who read to the witness that very important paragraph.
Yes.
I would have liked the witness to tell us about that very important meeting
Yes.
between herself, the former president, and Mr. Gwede Mantashe herself. I would like to hear. Could you please just tell us about that meeting?
Yes.
No.
I was invited, I received a phone call that Sunday, the 31st of October, in the afternoon, from the President's office to say that the President urgently needed to see me at his home, the official residence in Pretoria. I knew then that I was going to be dismissed.
Sorry, just repeat that. You knew then that you were to be dismissed?
Yes, the rumors and everything.
Oh.
The President never really called me to any urgent meeting. There was... and bear in mind...
I guess what you are saying is you had a strong suspicion.
Strong suspicion.
Yes, yeah.
Bear in mind that I had attempted to put this Transnet Cabinet memorandum before Cabinet. I'd requested special permission from the President a few days before, requesting the permission to jump the subcommittee process and take it straight, and heard nothing. And that never appeared on the agenda. Also, on that last cabinet meeting that I attended, what was on the agenda was the SAFCO, the recommendations around the board and chair of SAFCO. And I received a letter from the minister in the presidency, the late Minister Colin Shabani, saying that the president was requesting me to remove that item from the agenda, even though it was at the cabinet meeting and it had gone through the subcommittee process. And I declined, and I said, you know, we can't stop processes of appointment. And then I received a letter from, and I have copies of that, from Mr. Shabani saying, in view of what you have said, the president says you should go ahead with this cabinet memorandum. So that was discussed and agreed at cabinet. But I was surprised that the president took such a strong interest in SAFCO. SAFCO was one of the smallest of the state-owned enterprises. I think it had the lowest revenue base. And so it did confuse me why he would want to have his own say on that. So anyway, so that was a couple of days before, and all of that had happened then. And there'd been a lot of rumors, and the deputy minister had come to my office. And he said the rumors that he's hearing in Luthuli House is that I was going to be dismissed. And we discussed how I would handle it. And he said I should do as dignified an exit, and I said I agree. Okay. So I was summoned to the president. So I had a fair idea that I was going to be dismissed. Mr. Kathrada insisted that he accompany me in the car, and he was not invited into the president's residence, and he did not expect to be part of the meeting, and he was left sitting outside in the car. I then met with the president and Mr. Mantashe, and the president said that the NEC had decided that I ought to be redeployed as the ambassador to Finland, and then I said, you know, I'm sorry, I can't accept that. But I did say at that stage that I want to thank the president for the privilege of being able to serve my country as a cabinet minister, and I mean that. Any person who can serve your country as high a level as that, it's a privilege and it's an honor to do it. I didn't ask the reasons. For me, it was perfectly, you know, the president has the prerogative to dismiss. I also said that I was not going to go back to Parliament. The reason being that when I was made a minister, Mr. Kathrada, who had been staying in Cape Town at that time, moved back to Johannesburg, where his foundation was based, where his comrades, where his friends, family, a lot of people were based. And going back to Parliament, in the 2 years that I was a cabinet minister, Cassie was a lot of the time on his own because I had to be down in Cape Town. And I just felt it would be unkind and not fair because he had been perfectly accommodating to me when I had to be a minister, for me now to expect him to now pack up and move back to Cape Town. And I'd done my stint in Parliament. I'd been a parliamentarian from 1994 to 2008, and I think there was time for young blood to come in, and it was only, I thought there was nothing more I could contribute there. It wasn't in an active peak at all that I said I didn't want to go to Parliament. With that...
I'm sorry, I hear you say up to 2008. I'm assuming that when you were a minister, you remained a member of Parliament, or is that not so?
Yes, as a minister, yes. So 2010, you're right. I've done longer service than I credit myself with. And Then there was silence, and I said, is that all, And they said yes. And so I greeted them, and I left. The president helped me to open the door because the door was jammed, and I left, and I went home with Kathy, and we went to my sister, and her husband, who has stood by me all these years. When I was in prison, she was a rock that I leant on. And
So the dismissal was with immediate effect?
My sister was
I'm sorry. The dismissal, was it with immediate effect?
With immediate effect. Obviously, what happens is that you are dismissed, but it's only when the new minister is sworn in that, in effect, there's a transfer. So after explaining this to my sister and watching the television, in which it was portrayed that the president, from the presidency, it was portrayed that those of us who were being reshuffled, because I was not the only one, were being reshuffled because we were incompetent. And there was a whole narrative around that. Anyway.
Was that based on any media statement issued by the presidency?
There was a media statement that was released, yes.
Oh, it's not that the media was interpreting it in a certain way?
Yeah, and it wasn't a thing, they are incompetent, but the innuendo was certainly that the president wanted, good professional people and whatever. I then spent the whole night clearing my office at home, because you have to take back documents. And I went back to the office in the morning and organized my office, handed over all the documents to be filed, and requested that my secretary and whatever organize a handover meeting for me, because it had been announced that Minister Gigaba was taking over, so that I could hand over to him. I then left. Mr. Gigaba hadn't yet come to the office. I then left, and I was told the next day that Mr. Gigaba declined a meeting with me.
Before you go to the next day, have you now completed the events of the 31st of October 2010?
Yes, and the 1st of November.
Oh, yes. That's what the chairperson wanted to hear from you, from your own mouth, as to what transpired on that day. May I inquire from you that prior to the 31st of October 2010, did the president express or indicate to you in any form that he was not happy with your performance as the Minister of Public Enterprises?
No, he didn't. The president at a certain stage did assign certain very heavy responsibility on me. He made me the minister to coordinate the drawing up, the drafting and consolidation of government's energy plan going forward. Now, I don't know, there is a Minister of Energy, and I did say at Cabinet that I'm honored to be given this job, but there is also a Minister of Energy and whatever, but I was told very firmly by the President. And we successfully introduced and had passed with a fair amount of approval, because I engaged with civil society and a lot of players on this plan. I also signed a performance agreement with the President. I think it was in April 2010. The President's office signed performance agreements with every minister. And on that basis, the President would be able to evaluate your performance at regular intervals. I was never evaluated on the basis of my performance in terms of that agreement.
Yes. Were there any complaints which were made against you by any of the boards which were falling under your portfolio during that time or even prior to that?
No.
You said that the president never expressed any unhappiness with your performance, but of course, based on the evidence you gave yesterday, it must have been quite clear. It's quite clear that there were very sharp differences of opinion between yourself and the president in regard to some of the issues in your portfolio.
Yes, correct. So, I was aware that we often had differences of opinion, but he never called me in and said, I want to talk to you about these matters, I'm not happy, or the way that you're performing in the department as a minister. No, I never got that kind of feedback from him.
Is there room, you can just answer this question to the best of your ability, do you think there may be room for any suggestion that maybe your personality and his personality, your respective ways of dealing with issues were such that the kinds of differences that came up maybe were likely to come up, or is that something you have not thought about? I'm just thinking because the differences of opinion were quite sharp, I think, on certain issues, and I think they were expressed forcefully on both sides. You must just tell me if what I'm thinking you don't agree with, and feel free to say you think differently. I'm just exploring thoughts.
The president is a genial person, we know that. I cannot put aside the fact that probably dealing with a woman who held views might have been an uncomfortable experience for him. But I was careful to be respectful all the way through. At times we did butt heads. And yes, we are two very different kinds of people. But I think those who have worked with me have found that whilst I am firm on certain principles, I'm also very open to discussion and other points of view. And the fact that the president just was not working from the same set of values that I was working from, probably contributed to the breakdown in that relationship.
Okay, now thank you very much.
Thanks.
You may continue.
Ms. Hogan, a question may be posed to say that, but you were not dismissed. You were in fact offered a post in Finland. Why would you say that, that equates to a dismissal?
Well, I was dismissed as a cabinet minister and offered a redeployment as an ambassador. So yes, I was dismissed as a cabinet minister.
Now, you said who took over from you? Who took over?
Minister Malusi Gigaba.
Did Minister Gigaba recommend a new board to be appointed?
Well, Minister
After your departure?
Yes. The Transnet cabinet memorandum that I had proposed to go before cabinet in early November, and by which time I had already been dismissed, that was withdrawn from the cabinet process. And it must have been about 2 weeks later, at the next cabinet meeting, Minister Gigaba put forward proposals for Transnet board, which was approved. Some of the people who I'd recommended in my document, he had incorporated onto that board, some of them not.
I'm sorry, Mr. Mkwena. I may have missed something. The last communication that I just want to go back to prior to the dismissal before we go to what happened after your successor took over. I just want to go back to events that may have preceded your dismissal as cabinet minister. Now, I think the last letter which I think was
Annexure L, Mr. Chair.
was 28th September, isn't it? Was dated, which you wrote to the president.
The last letter I sent to the president was actually the 27th of October.
Okay, let me just get there. Mr. Mkwena,
I'm not sure if it's in this
page
pack.
366.
Page 366.
No, that is for September. Sorry, I sent a letter to the president requesting that the Transnet memo be expedited and placed on the cabinet agenda for the 15th of September. For the November one, sorry. It's complicated. I sent a letter to the presidency on the 27th of October requesting his assistance to expedite the placing of the Transnet cabinet memo onto the cabinet agenda. That was for November. The cabinet was meeting shortly in November.
Yes, yes.
And then 4 days later, he fired me.
Yes.
I don't have that letter. Yes. Sorry.
Okay. You might have planned to deal with this differently, but I would rather let us deal with it now. Events such as the Marocha incident, have you dealt with them?
They are the ones that we are just about to converse with the witness after the Transnet.
Yeah. No, I think they should come before the dismissal because they reflect the disagreements between the minister and the president in relation to certain people occupying certain positions. I would like to hear those prior to us getting to what happened after her successor took over. So I would like to hear about those, and I don't know if she has said enough about SAFCOL, and I don't know whether the Mumbai one was adequately dealt with as well. I would like all of those prior to the dismissal because I think that's where they fit in properly.
Mr. Chair, yes, we had structured the evidence differently, but we appreciate your point.
Yeah.
What we intended to do was to deal first with all the relevant issues pertaining to Transnet, so that you must be able to equate them with what now transpires at ESCOM, and thereafter we deal with SAFCOL, and we deal with the question of the Mumbai road, so that at least the evidence must be led in that structured manner for us to be able to follow and for her to be able to follow. But we are easy.
Yeah,
we will be able to...
I think that if you have regard to the terms of reference that we are dealing with, dismissals and appointments of members of the executive, what our terms of reference require is what were these dismissals about? What were these appointments about? And in regard to her statement reflects certain sharp differences between herself and the former president in relation to a number of entities and not just one. Therefore, I think it makes sense to canvass all of those differences of opinion between herself and the former president leading up to the dismissal.
We appreciate that, Chair. We can do that.
Okay.
Let's now jump and deal with the ESCOM issues to link them with your evidence. You preface those issues by referring to an ESCOM board.
Okay, I'm sorry. I just want to complete the picture just so that you understand, you appreciate where I'm coming from. Because it may well be that the dismissal, her dismissal, was not just about her differences of opinion with the former president in regard to Transnet. It may be that it was as a result of the many differences of opinion which arose in regard to the various state-owned enterprises. Okay, thank you.
Ms. Hogan?
Yes.
You are dealing with the issues of ESCOM, and you preface them by referring to a breakaway board session which was held on the 28th of October, 2009. Am I correct?
Correct.
Can you share with the chair what transpired in that session and what you were told occurred in relation to Mr. Marocha?
Chair, on the 28th of October, the board was having a breakaway session to discuss a strategy going forward, as is normal with boards. And bearing in mind that ESCOM was facing huge challenges both from a funding point of view and an operational point of view. I hesitate to use that word that I used yesterday that blacked out the lights, but the lights, certainly the operational challenges around providing a reliable system, reliable energy was certainly uppermost in all the board's mind. A very tense discussion ensued, and it was very robust. And in that process, the CEO of ESCOM, Mr. Marocha, got up and said that he, if this was the case, he was going to resign, that he was resigning, and he left the board and he left the room and said the board must make its decisions. At that point, the chair of the board, Mr. Bobby Gotzel, said, well, if that is the case, because there has been conflict between us at this meeting, myself and him, strong differences of opinion, I too will stand up and leave, and then the board must make a decision.
I just want to confirm that what you are relating in regard to what happened at that meeting of the board is based on reports that you received. You yourself were not there.
I was not present.
Yes, okay.
And later court cases and whatever.
Okay.
Now, this is a very difficult situation. You've got a CEO, who's about to resign of the most important state-owned enterprise. Anyway, the board then, to move matters on, the board then unanimously agreed that they would accept Mr. Marocha's resignation, and there were grounds for that. It wasn't just what had happened at that meeting. And Mr. Gotzel, and of course, a delegation from the board was then dispatched to meet with Mr. Marocha to inform him of the decision and to look at the modalities of his departure. And he met with them, and was informed, and there was an agreement that they would meet in the morning to discuss the modalities of his departure. I was informed by Mr. Gotzel that this had taken place. I was down in Cape Town, I flew up, and I immediately, the next day, went to the Eskom head office and was being briefed by Mr. Gotzel when Mr. Marocha walked in with a letter which he gave to me and had given to the chair, saying that he had in fact not offered to resign.
And that is now the Friday, the 29th of October, 2009, when you say that you flew down and went to Eskom's offices, and that's where you got a detailed briefing about what transpired.
Yes.
And at that moment, you say that Mr. Marocha then
came into the office and he said that it was not true, and it's the annexure here, yes, that that was the letter that I was given, that he was not accepting that he had resigned. He had not resigned.
May I refer you to page 368? Mr. Chair, that is Annexure M, which the witness is referring to. Ms. Hogan, is that the letter that you say that you were finished with by Mr. Marocha on the 29th of October?
Correct.
May I just take you a few steps back? From your own personal knowledge, prior to these events happening at this particular meeting of the board of Eskom, were you aware whether there were any challenges or strong differences between the chairperson of the board, Mr. Bobby Gotzel, and the then chief executive officer of Eskom, Mr. Marocha, that may have been making it difficult for the two of them to work together, or for the board to work smoothly with the executive, or was this coming to you as a complete surprise?
I'm trying to recollect now.
But if you can't remember, it's fine.
I was not intimately involved with understanding the tensions. It had been kept in-house. I do know that when Mr. Marocha came into the office and handed over the letter, where Mr. Gotzel and I were present, that they proceeded to have a very, very harsh interaction. And it was then that I perceived just how difficult that relationship was. But one of the things that alerted me, which, you know, as a minister, you just put it in the back of your head, was that one of the senior black managers at Eskom, I'd been at Eskom, and I'd just heard that he was resigning, and we saw each other in the lift, or, you know, some place. I didn't ask to see him or anything. It was just per chance. And I said, I'm very sorry that you're leaving. And he said to me, if you don't sort out the CEO, a lot of us, or, you know, a lot more are going to leave. And that quite shocked me. But, you know, all through this period, when this happened, I wasn't quite aware of the intensities of the conflicts and whatever. It came to me fairly new. I'd only been a minister for about 4 or 5 months when this all blew up. Yeah, so you are correct. In a sense, I wasn't fully appraised.
Okay, all right. You may proceed.
Yes. Now you received the letter Annexure M. What did you do?
This was...
I'm sorry. Do you want her to tell us the main important points made in the letter?
Yes, the letter was written the next day by Mr. Marocha, and basically he was saying This is a matter of national importance. My remarks of frustration cannot be construed as an offer to resign. The chairman has expressed similar frustrations numerous times and has not been treated in this manner. I was stunned by the response of the board to say they accept my offer, and then he goes on to say what he thought the real issues were.
Feel free to read the letter if you can't remember the points. Feel free to read the letter.
He gave this letter, and he had given it, I think, to members of the board as well. I'm not sure,
Yeah.
but it was to me and to Mr. Gotzel. I got the letter in the office, yes.
Yes, the chair was saying that you are at liberty to read
Oh, I must read. Oh,
the
sorry.
letter so
Yes,
that you
I
can
think
be...
Sorry. Okay.
The letter reflects at least, maybe reflecting at least Mr. Marocha's view of why there were the events that had happened. So I think it's important to just
Okay.
read what he says.
So the letter is addressed to the ESCOM board and not to myself. And it says, "Dear board members, I've reflected on this matter overnight. I believe this is a matter of national importance. This matter is about the role of the SOEs in this phase of the democracy. It is about the future of this country. It is not about the relationship between the chairman and the chief executive. My remarks of frustration in the board meeting can in no way be construed to be an offer to resign. The chairman has expressed similar frustrations numerous times and has not been treated in this manner. I was stunned by the response of the board to say they accept my offer and wish to communicate with the following immediate effect. The real issues are the following. I have put before the board a very comprehensive strategy document about the direction I propose ESCOM should take. The strategy articulates very key matters of national importance relating to our contribution to this developing democracy. I am of the firm view that the board must engage on the matters articulated in the strategy document, as this is the most important duty of the board. The real issues between the chairman and myself are rooted in the differences on the role of ESCOM in this phase of our democracy and the role clarity between the chairman and the chief executive. I believe as a board, we will be failing the country if we do not show leadership on this matter. Conclusion. I have not offered to resign, and I'm not offering to resign. I believe the role of ESCOM is key to the development of our country during this phase of the democracy. It is a view I believe strongly in and a view I'm willing to fight for whatever the consequences. Yours sincerely, Mr. Marocha, and it is CC to myself and Minister Dipuo Peters.
Now you received that letter. At that time, you are still at the offices of ESCOM. Did you engage with the board members to then try to interrogate that here is Mr. Marocha telling me something different from what was conveyed to me?
The board was still was present at the ESCOM offices because this was more than a one-day board meeting. And I was aware that they were sitting in the boardroom next door. So when I got this letter and I heard the fierce interchange between the chair and the CEO, I thought I wanted to consult with the board to get their view. So I went to the board. I asked Marocha not to be present because I wanted the board to be able to express their views as the board itself. And I said at the preface, I said, I'm going to ask each and every one of the board members to give me their view on what happened and whether Mr. Marocha had indeed offered to resign and whether that of the board's view had been communicated to him and what their view was, had he resigned. And I did say that if there is any person sitting here who has a different view to another board member, they must express that different view. There will be no repercussions for that, but I want an honest account from all those board members. I went round the board and each board member confirmed that Mr. Moroka had offered to resign, that they discussed it, that they felt that they will accept that resignation. And the board, there was a fair amount of anger within the board itself. And some board members were more frank and said that they felt that he was not performing to par as a CEO. So I then left the boardroom and I had also requested that the head of the legal department in my department come to head office, plus my advisor, my ministerial advisor. And I asked them to bring in a senior counsel because I wanted legal guidance, because this is a tricky matter. And Michael Katz was called in. I consulted with him. I consulted with my deputy minister and with my legal advisor and my political advisor. Both the deputy minister and myself were of the view that the relationship between Mr. Moroka and the board had deteriorated very significantly, and that this final denial that he had resigned was the final nail in the coffin, as it were. I did not want to get involved in this matter as a minister, but I did feel that we needed to get a very quick solution. So then I requested my deputy minister, who does not have my executive authority, but my deputy minister, who is an exceptionally, who is able to engage very well with people.
Who was a deputy minister?
Minister Enoch Godongwana. I asked him to meet with Mr. Moroka and say, listen, is there not an elegant way of dealing with this? It's clear the relationship has broken down.
Just one second. When you were listening to board members give you their accounts of what had happened, was your deputy minister with you or not really?
I cannot recall. I think he was. I can't recall.
You can't recall.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry.
But, you know, he and I worked very closely together. And
if he wasn't there, I assume
he would have been
you would
briefed
have briefed
afterwards.
him before asking him to speak to Mr.
Oh,
Moroka.
definitely.
Yes.
And he was part of the discussions with senior counsel. We spent quite a long time discussing all of the ins and outs of this. And so I was just simply trying to facilitate a process, but not to instruct the board or to take sides in this matter. But I wanted the deputy minister to convey that, you know, there was almost what one calls an irretrievable breakdown in the relationship between the board and Mr. Moroka. The deputy minister then went ahead, I think arranged to meet with him. There's some confusion how often he met. In the court papers there are differences. But anyway, Mr. Moroka, I was told that Mr. Moroka would like to think about that. The deputy minister proposed to him saying, let's not make a big public event out of this. Let's find a dignified way for you to move on. Let's talk about the modalities of your exit. And let me say up front, I have never ever had any reason to believe that Mr. Moroka was in any way corrupt. He was a very fine engineer. And it has always been regrettable for me that, you know, the turn of events that finally took place did take place. Because he was not one of those people who was just there for himself. He truly wanted to serve the country in his capacity. So I wanted a dignified exit, for him to consider a dignified exit, to both help the board and to stop this whole thing from blowing out of control. Eskom was in too vulnerable a position to afford this kind of confrontation.
Yes. Now, did Mr. Marocha accept, did he accept that he must, exit the Eskom as you had proposed or as the deputy has proposed?
He said that he had to attend a family funeral in Limpopo and he would come back after that to meet, and he would like to think it through.
Did he come back?
The deputy minister met with him again, which is my understanding, and he said he did not want to talk to the deputy minister. He wanted to speak to the minister.
This would have been
On the
what date
Monday.
now? The meeting of the board, was it on the 29th or did it start on the 28th?
It was on Friday. It was on the Thursday. Oh, wait. The meeting of the board was on the 28th.
Yeah.
The
And
29th was when
letter.
I spoke to the board. The 30th was the Friday when Mr. Godongwana spoke to him. And then it was the weekend. And then Mr. Godongwana met with him on the Monday. And he said that he would like to meet with me, not with the deputy minister.
And Monday would have been what date?
That would have been the 31st, that would have been the 2nd of November.
Oh,
Yes.
okay. Based on what we know in terms of when you were dismissed, it would have been after you had been dismissed.
Yes.
Okay.
It would have been, well, you see, what had happened in the interim was the board was getting extremely edgy. They were not willing, and I perfectly understood that, to allow this process to go on and on all the time. I think they were uncertain what position I was going to take. And they were wanting to ensure that no incorrect political interference happened. And they're correct on that. So I had a few engagements telephonically with the chair of the board, who was conveying to me the sentiment of board members. And I was saying to the chair, I fully understand that sentiment, but we do need to try and have as dignified an exit and as unproblematic an exit, because this can affect the reputation of Eskom. The board, as I understood in later testimony into court and whatever, the board took legal opinion on this from senior counsel, who informed them that they have the authority to dismiss or to accept or whatever. So the board then sent a letter, which I wasn't aware of at the time, saying that they've accepted his resignation, and even if that resignation does not hold as accepted, on the basis, and I forget the exact words, but on the basis of...
You are dealing with that on paragraph 70? 70. Paragraph 70 on
yes.
page 16.
And stating that incapacity as a manager constituted further grounds for terminating the relationship should the resignation dispute not be settled. Now, I had concerns about that second aspect of the letter, because I had concerns about due process. If you are going to dismiss someone on the grounds of due process, then due process must occur. I then instructed my head of my legal department to engage with the chair of ESCOM on this matter, to hear their views. And they put forward opinion from their senior counsel that what they had done was in accordance with the opinion that they had received. So when I met with Mr. Moroka, I still had not sight of that letter. Mr. Moroka actually showed me the letter or informed me of its contents.
In terms of your statement, just to assist the chair with the chronology, you said that you met with Mr. Moroka on the 4th of November,
Yes.
2009.
Yes.
And
Yes.
that is in terms of your paragraph 71. You can talk to it.
So then,
I'm sorry. So is this 2009 or 2010 that
this
we're
is
talking?
2009.
Yeah, okay, all right.
I just put the Gama
that-
story down, and now I had another
Okay.
story.
Then I think I was mistaken, and I think you were mistaken too, because you went along when I said the 2nd of November. I don't know what Mr. Moroka was going to have done. I said you would have been dismissed by then because of what you have said.
Yes.
But actually, if it was 2009,
Yes.
you were still minister in
Yes.
November.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, so
Sorry. I confused matters.
Yeah, okay.
That is the reason why I'm highlighting this date.
Yes, no, that's important. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, we are talking
Too
about
much detail for this old
September,
man.
October 2009.
Yes,
November
yeah.
2009. Okay.
2009 was a hard year. So I then met with Mr. Moroka.
On the 4th of November 2009, yes.
Yes. I met with him at South African Airways gave us a facility. I wanted to meet with him off-site, privately. And we spent about 4.5 hours in a meeting. And he was insistent that I, as a minister, must exercise my leadership. Now, that was being echoed already outside when the Youth League was shouting that there should be leadership. The chair of the portfolio committee would later in those days talk about the minister must exercise her leadership.
Was that being said at that time in relation to the ESCOM issue or just in general?
The ESCOM issue, and Mr. Moroka's issue. And I made it clear to him, and I wasn't being harsh, but I said it is not on my authority to intervene in this matter. It's a matter for corporate governance. And that is why I am trying from behind the scenes to resolve this matter. I said that I was surprised at that letter and that I would ask my department to look at the second part of that letter from Transnet around, and if the view was that it was incorrect, I'd ask Transnet, ESCOM to rescind that part of the letter. But he was absolutely, I can say, arrogant and saying, Minister, you must exercise your authority, your leadership. You must affirm that I am the CEO. I said to him, look, we can set in a process of mediation on this matter. He said, no, I'm not interested. You must exercise your leadership. I offered him arbitration. He said, no, you must exercise your leadership. At the end of that,
What was your understanding of what he was meaning by insisting that you must exercise your leadership?
that I must exercise my executive authority to confirm that he had not resigned and to confirm him in the position as CEO of Eskom.
In other words, to resolve or decide the dispute between himself and the board about whether he had offered or not offered to resign.
Yeah, he was insistent that he remained the CEO, and he wanted me simply to affirm that he was the CEO of Eskom. We spent nearly 4.5 hours there. My legal advisor was next door and the deputy minister, because he only wanted to speak to me on his own. And, finally I had to say to him, I have offered you a dignified exit. I have offered you mediation. I have offered arbitration. Beyond that, I cannot go. And we then finished the meeting. I contacted the chair. The chair of the board had been quite anxious about my meeting with Mr. Moroka, but I did say I needed to hear him out. But they had already issued that letter without my knowing at that point.
The letter that you're referring to is where the board has confirmed
that he'd resigned, that they'd accepted his resignation, and if that was not held to be a resignation, it was on the basis of incapacity. I then contacted the chairman of the board and told him what had taken place, that I had not been able to have any effect on the process, and that, in my opinion, the board had to do whatever the board saw fit and how they were advised to do. President Zuma was not in the country at that time. He was abroad.
Who was acting?
The Deputy President Motlanthe. The next morning, I went and I briefed President Motlanthe about everything that had taken place. I also briefed him about my concern and unease about the particular letter, but I briefed him that the board was now going to go ahead with whatever processes, because I had withdrawn as trying to facilitate a resolution on the matter.
And what was the reaction of President Motlanthe?
President Motlanthe, you just said, you need to do what you need to do here. He didn't try to intervene. There was, the board and the chairperson had called a meeting of all the senior management at Eskom headquarters the next day.
Would that have been the 5th of November then? Your meeting with Mr. Moroka was 4.
A mistake. There seems to be a mistake here in my affidavit. It says the 4th, but I believe it was the 5th. I'd have to double check that.
Are you referring to paragraph 72?
Yes.
So that you can check that, but according to you, it was the next day, it must have been the 5th.
Yeah. I think it was that. We must just check that.
If you go to paragraph 73, you are now talking about that meeting which was called by the chairperson.
Yes, that's right. Yes.
Would that meeting have been on the 5th or the 6th?
That meeting must have been on the 5th.
Was it after you have briefed President Motlanthe, a day after you have briefed President Motlanthe, or the same day?
Same day.
Same day, oh yes.
Yeah.
All right, tell us about that meeting, which was called by the chairperson of Eskom.
And the chair had announced that Mr. Moroka had resigned. In the media, this had become a big issue. And it was not good for Eskom. Had Mr. Moroka resigned? Had he not resigned? What was going on? Why is the minister not confirming, not confirming? It was becoming a bit of a political football out there. And so the media was invited to a press conference immediately after the informing senior management. So they were out in full force to hear what the chair of Eskom had to say, to clarify what the status, what the position was.
Ms. Hogan, before you go into the details of what transpired in that meeting. Mr. Chair, I'm told by Mr. Pretorius, who appears to be very thirsty, that it's now 11:15. Yes.
I'm sorry, it is 11:15. We'll take the short adjournment and resume at 11:30. Thank you.